So the first thing to know about Procreate is that this is your gallery. So this is where all of your canvases will live. You can see I have several here, but the way to create a new canvas is to go to the top right-hand corner and click this plus button. So in here, it'll give you the options to pick a predefined size for your canvas, or you can make your own specifications using this little folder-looking plus button in the top right corner of this window. So here I can specify um, the width and the height. You can also choose the DPI, but I normally just keep it at what it's at, and then it'll also tell you the maximum number of layers that you can have in this canvas. That is going to change based on the dimensions. So if I were to change this to say 2800, you can see that my maximum layer number did go down. Another thing that you can do is if you click up at the top where it says Untitled Canvas, you can name this new canvas you created. You're not actually naming the specific canvas, but you're naming the size, and that will stay. So maybe if you're making a background for a Tableau dashboard, I can make that and it'll pop open. And if you can see, if I go back, it's called Untitled Artwork because I wasn't naming that canvas. If I go back to my Create Canvas area, at the bottom we'll see Tableau Dashboard, and so it'll keep that there. And you can see I have some untitled ones, and then Twitter is also one I created because that's often where I share my pictures. So another thing to know about your gallery is that you can create stacks. So if I scroll down here, you can see I have a stack of all of my Pixar drawings there. The way to create a stack is to click on one of your canvases, hold it, and then drag and drop it on top of another one. So this was already a stack, so I can just put it in there. And with that, we will go into a canvas. So I'm going to talk about all of the options at the top first, starting with your settings. So that would be that wrench in the top left corner. If we open that, just going from left to right with the add button, the main features to point out here is your options to insert both a photo or to add text. So let's try that insert photo option and choose this sunset picture. So I can resize it, and the options to do that are going to be automatically pop up when you insert this picture, and it's also going to put this on a new layer, so you don't have to worry about it ruining the layer that it's already on. It's going to create a new layer in your layers panel when you insert that image, and we'll talk more about the layers panel later. The next option over in this add section is to, that I use most frequently, is to add text. So here you can edit it as normal, and then if you click the AA in the top right-hand corner of that text editor window, here is where you can choose the different font types. On the left, the style, if it's applicable. So let's see, well, this one also only has regular. This one only has bold. One of these has to have more than one. Okay, here, so italic and semi-bold and bold. This is also where I can change the size, the kerning, the tracking. You may be familiar with some of those things if you use other design software, and then the alignment and some other options over here. Another thing to point out is that you can import fonts, so these aren't the only fonts possible, and you can get those from Safari, similar to the way you would import them for other applications. This is also a good thing to point out. If you want to continue to be able to edit the text, you need to keep it as unrasterized, but if you want to do some more design things with it, you will have to rasterize it. So my recommendation here is to create a duplicate, one that is rasterized and one that's not. So you still have an editable option, but one you can play with as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So back to the settings, we're going to go to Canvas. a couple good options here. So the top one's crop and resize, which is exactly like it sounds. This is where you can change the size of your canvas if you want to. I don't actually use this option as frequently as you might think you will. But I also, I think, just have a great idea now of the general size that I want to use when I start. So up at the settings is where you can change that and pick those options. So I'm just gonna click done. The next thing to talk about here is the drawing guide. So I use this very, very frequently. This is going to create a grid on your view. And you can actually edit this, so I'll show you how to do that. If we go back there, and now that we have it toggled on, we can choose Edit Drawing Guide. So here, you can change the color of the grid. As you see, I'm using this little scale up at the top. I can change the opacity of the grid lines. So whether or not I want them to be very vibrant or just sort of in the background. For reference, I normally choose something in the middle. Thickness of the lines, so again, really bold or more faint, and that one I don't use as as often. And then the grid size, so this will change how big the grid is in the background. And in addition to using these little sliders, you can also click. So I'm going to select where it says 68 pixels next to grid size, and you can type it in as well. I'm at the point of use where I kind of know a grid size that I like. For the most part, 60 pixels is what I use the most frequently. So we're going to leave it at that, and I'm just going to adjust the color a little and the opacity for this project. Next thing in this window, which is a really, really great tool, and it's very new to the platform, is reference. So I'm going to toggle that on. What this does is, and I already did it in this one, so that's why you're getting this picture. What this does is it allows you to sort of hover a window in your canvas that shows a different image. So here, I had this up because I was referencing my Regina King picture, and when I was drawing her character in Watchmen. So this is great because I can sort of, zoom in here and have that as a reference, as the name suggests, while I am drawing, and look at those different parts. Another great option here for the reference panel is you can also reference the canvas. So what this is doing is showing me the full view, or however I want. I could zoom in as well. And this is great if you're working in a smaller piece of your canvas, but you want to see its effect on the full thing. So let's say maybe I'm using this. Just going to do a new layer here, and I can see what the effect is of the changes that I'm making on the full canvas, even though I'm only looking at a small part. You can also do it the opposite way, I guess, where I can zoom in here and have it zoomed out here and see, what's happening there in real time. So use that frequently in my work. And then you can just tap it and press the X for it to go, or you can toggle it off here. Either one works. The next option, pretty simple. This is how you can share. I use the PNG option most frequently, and you can either save it down to your iPad. I normally airdrop it either to my phone or my Mac, however. The other options I use are for the animated things I created. So if a GIF or an MP4, I use those as well, but not as frequently. Next thing in the settings options is a video. So if you've seen me post a time lapse of my drawing, that is where I get it from, and we can look at that really quick. So time lapse replay, this is, I wrote all the things that I want to talk about, so it's showing me the time lapse of that, and I can, it'll show the full thing, and you can also export that. So in the export time lapse option, that's how I get that video that I post to Twitter. Next one's really important. This is where you set up sort of your preferences for your canvas. And I don't use, as you can see, a lot of these, but this is also where you will change your gesture controls. So these are basically what you would probably refer to as shortcuts in other applications. They're little things that you can do to bring up a lot of these options. So you can specify here what gestures you want to sort of trigger these different things. I don't have many of them turned on though, because one thing to be wary of is it is really easy to do some of these on accident, because a lot of them are combinations of touching with a couple fingers, or swiping, or tapping with your Apple Pencil, and it's really easy to do that in accident. So I do keep a lot of these turned off. Two of the ones that I like the most are the quick menu, which I will show later, but just want to say that this is one of the ones that I do like to keep on, and the layer select. Those are probably the two shortcuts that I use the most frequently. So that's pretty much it for the settings. Next, I'm going to skip the second one over, which is effects, because that one's going to have more impact once I put a couple things on the canvas. And I'm going to go to the selection and move tools, which will be the next two. So selection is the third one over, and it does basically what it sounds. You have the ability to select in a couple ways. So there's the freehand one, where you can sort of draw in any shape that you want to. And then this is used most frequently, the selection tool is used most frequently with the move tool. So now that I've selected that, I can click this arrow, which is my transform tool, actually is what it's called, and I can move that piece of my canvas that I made that selection around anywhere I want to. Now I just hit undo. You can also select in a rectangle, or I can select in a circle as an option as well. And if you want to make multiple selections, which is an option, you're just going to use this add button on the bottom left. So let's say I want to select this area, add, select this area, add, and select this area, and add. Now I can click move, and all three of those are selected. And then another thing to note about the move tool, which it did pop up a new window at the bottom, if you didn't notice, is this reset button. It's very easy to move things in a way that you didn't mean to. So if I hit reset, it'll go straight back, and I have the ability to sort of try again. So that is the selection tool. Another thing I use the selection tool for is the copy and paste option. So let's say there's one part of my layer that I would like to put into a different layer. And again, I'll talk a little bit more in depth about layers later on. I can do the selection tool, hit copy and paste. And if you saw at the top, it said new layer from selection. So if I go into my layers panel, I can see that now just that part that I selected is its own layer. So that's great too for duplicating things, especially if you realize you need to do more work on a particular area. I do like to just put it in a new layer. The next thing I use a selection tool for is the color fill option. So if you see at the bottom, it's the second thing from the left. And what this does is it will fill in the areas that you are selecting. So I'm going to do freehand. Select the color fill. It's going to take whatever color you are currently on. So that was probably a weird shape to make. I'm going to click add. I can create another one, add another one, and I'm just going to press clear, get rid of those, and show you that you can do it with shapes as well. So if I wanted to make a bunch of shapes and have them all be filled when I made them, I have that option here too. And the way I use this most frequently is for shading. So I'm going to actually bring up my reference panel again and go back to, oh, the app quit on me. That doesn't actually happen to me that frequently. Image. This is great if I'm doing a lot of highlighting or shadows. So if you can see on her face, you know, maybe I would do, it's going to look a little weird because there's nothing underneath it. But if I wanted to do a highlight on her nose like that, and add, and maybe do a highlight on her cheek, and you know, maybe her forehead a little, and I'd probably also do this, you know, part right by her mouth. So you can see that sort of looks like the highlights of a face a little bit, and then have that have all of those pieces, and then work with those. So the next thing I probably do, I don't actually know what brush this is on, so it's actually probably not that bad, is I would just smudge the outsides a little. I'll get more into the smudge option later, but that is another great use of the selection tool. So toggling back off my reference layer and talking a little more about the transform tool. So again, that's that cursor figure in the last option on the top left. So I'm going to pick that. You have a couple options here. So the uniform transform option will hold the aspect ratio. So as you can see, it's getting bigger width-wise and height-wise to keep the ratio that it was. There's the freeform tool, so this will allow me to sort of stretch and move in any direction that I feel like. And again, you know, the reset button is great. Distort will allow you to pull sort of one area. So you have some fun options here, and then the warp will sort of bring up this grid where you can again push and pull just some of these pieces. I don't really use distort or warp that often. I mainly use the uniform or the freeform. Also, you have the option to rotate or flip should you want to use those. Again, don't use them that frequently, but they're there. So that is the top left portion for the most part. We are going to come back to the effects. Now let's talk about brushes. So the very leftmost option on the top right portion, these are where all of your brushes are. And Procreate does a really great job of loading a lot of default brushes in here. However, you can import brushes from online, so you can find packs either for free or you can buy them and you can import them. You can also adjust the ones that are in here if you want to. So if you see down here, I have two that are named Nebula, or the bottom two are named Nebula, and this little swervy line that looks like the Procreate logo signifies that this isn't actually from the app. So one thing I like to do is sometimes I like the brush, but I want to change just maybe a couple things about it. So I recommend duplicating it first, and the way to do that is to slide to the left, hit duplicate, and you see that little logo popped up on the right hand corner. And then if I were to tap on this, it brings up all of the settings for this particular brush, and there are a lot, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know what most of them do. I do know what jitter does, and being data people, I'm sure you guys do as well. So you can sort of change how far spaced these individual items are. So maybe I want it to be, maybe I really liked the glitter one, and I think it was at maybe like 156 or something like that, but maybe I want it to be tighter together. Maybe I don't want it to be so spread out when I draw with it. So I can create that and rename it and have the other option. I'm just going to delete that one though. Yes, I'm going to delete it. I highly recommend though, when you're starting out, going through all of these folders. So they are set up with different brushes based on sort of these different applications or these different art types. I really recommend going through when you're getting started and just trying them all out. That's what I did, and it exposed me to brushes that I probably wouldn't have known were there and I ended up using later. So for example, one of those is this old skin one. I think it looks kind of like leather to me, and I used it to represent leather on a belt. So here's what it looks like, just to show you. And then this is a good time to point out the left side panel. So the top slider is going to adjust your brush size, and the bottom one is going to adjust your brush opacity. So I'm going to put the size all the way up just so you can see what this brush looks like. And then if I want it to be a little bit lighter, some brushes are more affected by size and opacity than others. And then at the bottom is your undo and redo buttons. And one thing I like about Procreate is if you look in the top middle, it will tell you what you are undoing and redoing. So I'm undoing paint stroke, redoing paint stroke, which is good if you need to back up a lot. It helps you know where exactly to back up to. And then just so you know, some brushes are pressure sensitive, and some brushes are sort of tilt sensitive, I believe is the way they refer to it, which means the way that your pencil is facing will change the way that it draws. So that is not what I thought I was on. I thought I'm going to look at flare now. So flare is one of those ones where, you know, they're facing that way when I'm drawing that way, and then now they're facing this way when I'm drawing this way. So that does change depending on the orientation of your canvas. And then trying to think of a good example of one that probably changes when you press harder. Maybe syrup. Let's see. Right, so see how this is me pressing lightly. This is me pressing hard. I'm not changing the brush size, not changing the opacity. As you can see, I haven't touched anything on the left, but it is going to change the effect, and I can even do it, you know, mid-stroke, so getting harder and then lighter again. So just something to keep in mind. And then here I'm going to pop up some of my favorite brushes. So, oops, need to select the layer that I'm trying to move. These are some of my most used brushes. So the 6B pencil is in sketching. Whenever I start a drawing, this is always the first thing that I go to, and I like to do it in this red color. Actually, I'm not sure why, but it works for me. So I'm gonna actually change the background to white, which is a bad idea. Ignore that. So it's just a good sketching, like I said, sketching pencil. I'm probably not doing a great job of showcasing it right now. Okay, let's undo a couple things. Elevator music. I'm gonna change that again, and I'll go through how to do this momentarily. Let's just choose maybe this yellow. Oh no. Now I want to choose yellow. Okay, so sketch, right? It just, I think, creates sketching lines really nice, and I think it's pretty easy. The technical pen is what I use mostly for outlining, so that's going to be in your inking folder. It's this one right here. I'm just going to use a little bit of a brighter color. I like this one because it's not very pressure sensitive. I don't want the width of my outline to be changing depending on how hard I'm pressing, because that is something that's pretty hard to control. And I also think the streamline is pretty great in the sense that it writes pretty smoothly, if you can sort of see that. So this is my my brush of choice for outlining. Dry ink is also in your inking section, and you use this more for, I guess, smudgier type things, but just like the way that it looks. Monoline is great for shapes and really simple things, and it is just what it sounds like. It's in your calligraphy section, so it's here. Pretty similar to the technical pen, but I find that sometimes it's a little harder to control. It's not as smooth drawing wise, but it is, you know, it makes a very good line, so I use that frequently. I actually don't use chalk that much, but I watch a lot of TikToks about people who use Procreate, and people seem to love this one. So just showing you that one because I know it's pretty popular. Brush pen is my favorite option to write with. So actually all of these names on the side are written with brush pen. So I think that's, you know, a pretty good way to see it. And I make a lot of lists on Procreate, and I didn't intend to use it in that way at the beginning, but I love using it that way now. And so brush pen is what I do that with. And then soft airbrush is what I do a lot of my shading with. I just like the way the outlines look. I think it's really easy to smudge. I think it has a good size range. So another thing to talk about with the size is what the minimum size and the maximum size looks like is really going to change dependent on the brush. So I think a good example is fine tip. This is the maximum, this is the max size for this. This is as big as it gets with its current settings, as opposed to marker. This is the biggest that it gets with its current settings. So that is going to differ. You can adjust that in the settings, but it's good to know when you're trying to work with one brush consistently, sort of what its capacity is. And that's why I really recommend going through all the brushes when you first get started. So that is the brushes. Next, I'm going to talk about drawing just a little bit. So I'm going to use monoline for this. If I were to draw a line, if I were to be on the layer that I need to be, and then draw a line, see it's a little wonky, but if I hold it, the line is now really straight. And I also have the ability, I'm just still holding down after I drew it to change it a little bit. And then if I let go, you'll see up at the top it says edit shape. So I have the option to still do some adjustments if I want to change where it starts and ends, or how long it is, I can do that. This is also the way that you make shapes. So if I were to draw something that resembles a circle, hold, see it creates a much smoother shape, and then I can edit at the top, hit circle if I do want a perfect circle. One thing I do want to say with this though is your shape needs to look semi like the shape in order to get the options to come up. So if I try to make a circle like this, it's not going to come up in the options because Procreate doesn't think that maybe I was trying to make a circle. So while it's a great option, you do need to sort of be close. So here I'm going to make, see, in that it's saying, hey, I don't know what you're making. So let's try again. There's a little bit of trial and error here. Now we have more options. Now I can change it to a rectangle, I can change it to a square, I can change it to an ellipse. So that is bringing up our options. And quadrilateral is just saying, hey, we're keeping the line lengths that you originally drew, but we're making it a little bit smoother and the corners better. The only other shape that I've ever actually tried is a triangle, so I know that does that too. That has a wonky corner. That also looks wonky, but those are the shapes that I use the most frequently. Another thing that's probably good to point out here, so I showed you one way to fill shapes with color with the selection tool. Another way is to color drop. So if I were to create that shape, let's see if it thinks this is a circle. It does, wonderful. I can press and hold on the color tool up on the top right corner, which I'll go into more later, and I can drag that and just drop it in here. So that will fill that entire shape that I have. Some important things to note here is that your shape does need to be completely closed. So if I were to do this, and you know, this is pretty close, not there, and I were to try to fill this, it's going to fill the entire canvas. Another thing to point out here, I'm not sure what's a good example of this, maybe blotchy, is you also need to choose a pen where the pixels are really close together. So I'm not sure. It could work with this. We'll see. Yes, that's what I expected. And that's because it can't really, it's a similar problem to the last one where it doesn't actually think the circle is closed because the pixels aren't very tight. Another thing to note about brushes, the next two options next to the brush tool are your smudge tools. That's that little magician's hand looking thing in your eraser. And you actually have all of the same brushes in both of these that you do in your regular brushes. So I can smudge in any of these. If I wanted to smudge sort of in that glimmer option we were showing before, I can, and this is what that looks like. Also, if I wanted to erase and maybe this bokeh lights option, there's that option as well. And I'm going to increase the opacity just to make that a little bit clearer. You can do that. And again, too, it comes with the same sizing and opacity options on the left. So I'm going to use maybe a little bit more of a normal erasing brush. I normally use hard airbrush if I'm trying to do like a really good erasing. If I want to erase this entire circle, that's the one I would use. But as you can see, so if I erased like this, that's pretty big, and I can erase at a smaller size. I wanted to, or I can raise at a lower opacity if I wanted to. So if I want it to be a little bit lighter, I have those options, and same for smudging. So also going to choose that hard airbrush. I can smudge, pretty big or a little bit smaller if I want to. So you have those options there, and I think now would be a good time probably to go back and reference our effects. So the magic wand pop out. There are a ton of options here, and I'm going to be transparent. I only use 2. I will talk about the top 3 though, because as you're getting started and more comfortable, these may be things you use more frequently. So, and actually this will be a good example of some of these other tools. I want to isolate just this yellow circle. I don't want color fill. I want to copy and paste it because I don't want to edit my little high. I want to keep that there. So I'm going to turn off this layer and just work with this yellow circle for now. So hue, saturation, and brightness are things you're probably pretty used to. So to make it more saturated or less, brighter, less bright. I mean, you guys probably know all of these, or change the hue here. So maybe make it this green. I don't use that option very often, and there's some other recoloring options I'll show in a bit, but that is there if you decide you want your layer to be changed, or as you may have seen, a lot of these options have both a layer and a pencil option. So I can just, maybe I don't actually know how to use this part on this one. Huh. Okay, well, just pretend I'm doing something. I'll show you how the pencil option works in the settings I do use. Color balance. Again, some options here that are probably a little bit more familiar to people who maybe do photography or other design things. Curves. Again, don't use those. The 2 I use most frequently are gauge and blur. So I'm going to do this at the layer level. It does what it says. So as you can see at the top, you can tell what level it's at. I honestly, for the most part, some stay in between the 2 and the 5 range. I don't think I've ever really gone outside of that for my needs. So right about there, it's a little bit hazy. If you're wondering, some applications I use this for. So earlier when I said that I use the selection tool to make, to use the color fill option, pretend this is a face. It's not a face. I would then go into the Gaussian blur and blur the outsides a little so they're softer, like that. And then I would normally go into my smudge tool, and again, now I'm really getting in the, that's way too small, in the weeds of my process, but smudge the outline. So this is how I did a lot of the work on my Regina Kingvis. So that is, that's the Gaussian blur option. I'm actually just going to make a whole new circle to show you the other option. Actually, the other option I use the most frequently is liquefy. This is really fun in my opinion. So there are actually a couple effects within this effect. So one is push, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but play around with the size and the pressure and the distortion at the bottom. And this sort of does what you think it would. There's also pinch, so sort of does kind of a little bit of the opposite. Twirl right and twirl left, and again, depending on the settings. So I'm going to reset it. Again, great option. Depending on how big it is, would my size and my pressure would sort of depend how this responds to the things that I'm doing. This is a really great option if you draw your picture and it looks a little funny to you. Maybe you're like, oh, the nose is a little too far over, or that one eye is not quite the size that that I want it to be. I often come in and use push. Let's say this was an eye. I know it's not quite the right shape, but put it maybe at a smaller size and just like make it just a little bigger to match the other one. So I use that. Another fun option here, and going to undo this and do this really quickly if I can. I'm gonna pick some phone colors here. Do the set matching. Oh, I didn't actually pick the phone color, I thought. Something is happening. Just gonna exit and come back and see. What is happening? It's mad I've been doing so many things so quickly. Great, okay, maybe she wasn't hitting it hard enough. Sorry about that. So I'm gonna make some fun swirly doos here. It's be a great time to, when taking notes, take a sip of your water. I know I wish I had some. Could be doing this much faster probably. I'm just gonna go through here and through here. Okay, we're just gonna speed this up. A fun groovy option is to go into liquify, pick your twirl, and sort of make this jiggly, if that's the right word. And this will be a good segue into our layers panel. So for layers panel, I'm just going to jump right in the deep end. When you add text, so I'm going to just type that's probably fine, maybe. Not that it matters what font I use, but I'm just gonna pick this one. Great, it says data. So I'm gonna put this above. One option that you can choose with the way your layers interact, and I'll show you how to make new layers and pick other options in a second, but this one's fun and it works well with what we just did, is if I click on the layer, so I'm just gonna tap once and choose clipping mask. It will, as it does in other applications, select just the places where there is information on the layer below it and clip down to that. The nice thing about using a clipping mask versus some other options that I will show you later is I can move this around and sort of change what it looks like. So maybe I want it to be here. I like this. Can do that. It's not destructive. I'm not only keeping that part. The entire canvas is still there, which is great because I can edit it, change the colors if I need to, duplicate it, and have that if I were to say, want to add fam. Maybe I wanted to do another word and I didn't before. I still have the option because both of those layers are still in their original settings. So clipping mask is a great layer option, but first I will show you, well, now I will show you how to create a new layer. So it's just this plus button here, and you can create as many as you want. And in this one, good example, it's saying clipping mask because that's what the layer above it was. So we can add that back on. You can rename them. So up here, new, I'm really bad at this, but I highly recommend doing it. I can group layers together. So maybe I want this layer, and I'm just going to drag to the left, or drag to the right, sorry, to multi-select, dragging to the right again, group. The main reason that I do this, to be honest, is if I want to toggle the visibility of many layers at once. So you can toggle visibility on individual layers, which you've probably seen me do a couple times now, boop, boop, or I can toggle the visibility of group at once. But it's also great for organization when I'm creating sort of more complex drawings. Like my Regina King viz, I will have a group for her head, her belt, her body, a group that's just the base, so it's mainly just the outline and some coloring. Because when you're creating sort of smaller pieces, it's really hard to see. So as you can see, there's little thumbnails for each of these layers, but it's not always easy to tell what's in those. So having groups definitely helps with the organization. So let's talk about some other, turn some of these off. Some other layer options. Another one is fill layer, and I use this semi-frequently, and it does basically what it sounds like. So it's going to fill the entire layer. What I use this most frequently though is with alpha lock. So I'm going to undo and show you how that works now. Just going to take my handy dandy monoline. So what alpha lock does, and this is a great way to recolor viz, similar to the select and color fill before. So what alpha lock does is it only allows you to make edits on what's already existing on that layer. So if I click alpha lock and I click fill layer, well, it's actually, I should pick a different color first. Pick this yellow. And I click fill layer. It's only going to fill what I already had on that drawing. And this is a great option if you're doing some layering, some editing. So maybe I want this to have sparkles on it. I want it to have pink sparkles, but I only want the sparkles to be in the circle. I already showed the clipping mask, which is a great option, but maybe I want them to just actually be one layer. If you can see, if I'm, you can't tell, but I'm drawing outside the circle and it's not showing up. It's only going to show up in places where that already exist on the layer when you have alpha lock turned on. And I guess to show what would happen opposite, now when I draw on the outside, I can see it is actually going to show up on the outside. So that's great. An example I use this for, I drew a picture of Remy, who is a rat from Ratatouille. He has a cute little pink circle nose, and I wanted to do some shading and some texturizing on it without having to do a lot of cleanup work afterwards. So just turn on alpha lock, and then I can make the edits just on the circle that I'd already created as the base for his nose. Another great option I'm going to use is clear. I don't use it that frequently because you can also delete layers, and to do that you're going to swipe left. So you have the option to lock, duplicate, and delete. I normally delete more than clear, but sometimes if I just need to start over really quick and I don't feel like deleting and adding a new layer, I'll just click the clear option. So we went through rename, fill layer, clear alpha lock, clipping mask, and then reference. Reference is a great option, especially for people who plan on doing a lot of drawings with outlines. So I should just have a circle layer at this point. What reference does is it looks, if you make a layer a reference layer, it's going to sample that layer on layers below it. So I'm going to pick a different color here. Let's say I want to fill the circle with yellow, but I don't want to do it directly on this layer because I might need to do some other edits over it. I want to keep a really clean, strong outline. I can still fill that circle on this layer below it because I made the top one a reference layer, like so. So now I can turn this off even and it will still stay. Now I have that yellow fill without compromising my outline, and what I mean by that I'll show you. So even if I turn off reference, the bottom one, because I filled while it was on reference, will stay that way. Let's say I fill on here. And maybe I want to do some textures. Oh, none of those textures are those ones. Yeah, let's say this one, and I want to do it in this turquoise. If I'm doing it like this, I'm doing it over my outline, right? I don't have a really strong outline anymore. As opposed to having this, where I can, again, alpha lock would be a great option here. I can make those textures, maybe smudge it a little bit, and I'm not destroying the outline. The outline's still strong, still vibrant, still very opaque, while me still using that shape as the base for my other drawings. So those are the layer options, and then a couple other ones. If I click this N, so just tapping this N next to the visibility checkbox, I can change the opacity. So through the full spectrum, and then you can also change how the layer interacts with layers below it. So I'm actually going to duplicate this layer, turn this one off, use my transform tool. So I think this will probably be able to show some of these options. I recommend just running through to sort of understand how they change some of these. I don't actually use any of these really ever, but you might, so just good to know they're there. Going back to normal, and when you see the N next to the layer name, or actually next to the visibility checkbox, that's just saying that the layer is set to normal. So we are most of the way through now, and just looking at the things that I wrote that I wanted to talk about, and we had a lot of them. And I think the last thing is to talk about color. Yeah, great. So just gonna delete these. And you could delete a whole group too. Oh no, my brushes. I can also move these outside of the group once they're in the group if I want to. So deleting a group with layers in it will delete the layers. We can delete just the group name, which is what that was. So color, maybe one of the most important things on here. It's that circle in the top right. So I'm gonna click it. I most often pick my colors on the disk option. So you can choose the sort of hue around the circle, and then the saturation within it. So pick this, and it'll show you in, if you can't see, also in this bubble here, but also in this little rectangle up here, which one you pick. I don't use classic or harmony, to be honest, but value is the other one I use the most. So you do have the ability to type in a hex code right here if you'd like. Similarly, if you find a color in here while you're drawing and you really like it, maybe want to use it someplace else, that's there too if you want to copy it. Another thing I do here is adjust the brightness and the saturation. So that's why I said I don't really use these options in the effects panel to do that on the layer, because I normally have decided in here what color I want. And the next thing that's really important to know about this panel is the palettes. So Procreate will already load in some default palettes for you, but you can create your own as well. So all the ones that you're seeing right now are ones that are created by me. There's a couple ways to do that. So you can create a new palette, which I'm not going to, because these ones have spaces. The sort of grayed out options are because they don't have colors in them. So I can add a color simply by clicking and pressing an empty square and selecting set current color. So the color that we had already picked up here, that's the color that it chose. So I can also add this one if I want to. So again, same process, hold and select, set current color. That's how you can add individual colors to a palette, and I've already done it here, so I'm just going to delete this and do it again. You can actually add a palette from a picture, which I think is really cool. So I'm gonna click the plus, new from photos, click that sunset picture from earlier, and it will create an entire palette from that picture, which is great if you find a picture that you really love. So that is a great ability there, and that's actually one of the newer settings that they put in one of the recent updates. And then lastly, I'm just going to talk about some miscellaneous things that I think are important to know. One is that unlike PowerPoint or Illustrator or Figma, you can't actually do things outside of your canvas. So creating a circle again. If I use my transform tool and move this maybe in this upper right hand corner. Once I exit this, the rest of that circle is gone. So just be wary of when you put things in a way that's going to drop off sort of the side of the canvas. You can't get that back. If I were to undo, I could, but if it happened a while ago, you would sort of be out of luck. So just be careful for putting things outside the canvas because it will get rid of them. Another thing I want to point out, so when we were talking about gesture controls, I pointed out two that I use very frequently, one being layer select and one being quick menu. I'm just going to show you how to use those now. So just drawing my 60th circle of this video. Let's say, this is maybe an exaggeration, but let's say I have a smudge, right? That's not a smudge, but pretend it's smudge size. A smudge, and I can't tell what layer it's on, right? Sometimes I have 50 layers in a canvas, and I think, oh, I want to get rid of that, but I don't want to have to look through all of my layers and figure out where that is. So the layer select and will allow you to I don't know if you saw that come up, but where it said layer 7, it'll tell you what layer it's on. And that's only saying layer 7 because that's its name. If I called it pick me, it would also tell me that as well. So that's great if you're trying to find, one small, small little thing happening on a layer and you don't want to go through all of them. It's really helpful because it's really easy to accidentally make marks. The other one that I use most frequently is quick menu here. So the shortcut I have here is just a tap. You can set these to be whatever you want them to be, and you can create a couple if you want to, but these are great to set up things that you do pretty frequently. So if you want just a very quick option to add text, this is sort of a shortcut menu in of itself outside of the gesture controls, and I'll bring that back up. And you can change what these are. So let's say I don't use flip vertically, that option. I can just tap that. Oh, that was funny. I can hold it down is what you actually need to do, and pick a different option. So maybe I want it to be, maybe paste, because I copy and paste pretty frequently and I have copy on the menu already. I can have that here, and so let's say, oops, I'm on, yes, a text only layer. So let's say I bring up my quick menu, copy, bring up my quick menu again, sorry, paste. It pasted a second version of that, and so maybe this would be a good example of one to use. It's thinking I want to create text on, I don't know why. Copy, paste. Oh, it's still copying and pasting the same thing. Okay, just pretend that worked. And so I use that, and then the last thing, which is really great, and maybe why I saved it for last, is the recolor option. So I've shown you both the selection tool and the alpha lock and fill layer, how to color sort of a lot of items at the same time, and so this is sort of the last way to do that. I'm going to create a couple more. And I'm going to duplicate this layer. Oh, one thing I should have also mentioned while we were in layers is that you can combine them. The reason I didn't mention is because I don't use it that frequently, but if you're running out of layer space, so as I mentioned earlier, you can only have so many layers in your work, you can just pinch them together and it'll merge down. There's also a merge down option in the layer options that you can use, but I don't use that one that frequently. So I want to color in all these circles, but I don't want to drag and drop to all of these. It's not that bad, but there could be some applications where it isn't that great. So a great option here is to use recolor, and you might have seen it in my quick menu. So I'm just going to bring up my quick menu, select recolor, gonna move that little thing inside one of these circles, and then I can just go like this, boop, 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 bam. They're all recolored. So that's great. The first time I saw this, the person was drawing an octopus and it had a lot of spots, and they used this, and it's a really quick way to color a lot of things at the same time. So that's sort of it for this. One thing I didn't really get into is animation, which is sort of its whole other thing. But to just show you what that could look like, if you are interested in it, I did make one for the Tableau conference this past year. So you may have seen it on Twitter, but this is what it looks like together. And that is also something you can do in here. And I'm actually going to change the settings, turn the frame rate up just so it's a little bit smoother. And yeah, so if you want another video on how to do that, I'd be more than happy to make one. But you know, I hope this helps, and I can't wait to see the things that you guys make.